I need God to cleanse me. That's the forgive us our trespasses, and by the way, that comes from the Book of Common Prayers, debts and trespasses. It's the translation that was, used in that day. And forgive those who trespass against us. What is that? Well, because we're so prone to relational bumps. By the way, there are 73 Greek words in the Lord's Prayer. 25 of them talk about our sins, our struggles. In all of the works of the flesh in Galatians 5, half of them are relational bumps. We are so prone to relational bumps. We scrape each other, we wound each other, we easily get infected with spiritually deadening bitterness. Bonnie and I, one of the things that we got to do for 4 years is we traveled to these huge conferences where closed country, limited access country doctors, medical missionaries gather outside of their closed countries in this neutral location, Thailand, Greece, places like that, Africa. And they come together for 2 weeks of spiritual nurture. And for 4 years, Bonnie and I got to be the 2-week, they called us spiritual mental health care providers. I loved it. In fact, I even have scrubs. And I have my name on it and everything. I mean, I feel like a doctor of the soul. Did you know I was teaching one of the years that I did it, I taught on bitterness. And there was a doctor out there who was leaving his jungle hospital that he had built from scratch because he had gotten infected from a bump with bitterness. And he'd already exploded, and I didn't know any of this. He was just sitting out there. There were 800 medical missionaries, doctors and nurses. And I said, did you know there are 7 evidences of bitterness? And I was going through the list. And he was sitting like this. He had to go through the conference. It was his last duty, and he was going home. He was a 6-figure, well, that's not much anymore, but he made hundreds of thousands of dollars as a doctor before he became a missionary, and he got all angry and he was going to go back to making hundreds of thousands of dollars in America after being a missionary. And he was just waiting. His last event was this conference, and he was sitting like this, looking at the floor, but he was kind of listening. And I was on about the 2nd or 3rd sign of bitterness when he turned and looked at his wife. Now, the reason I know this is he told me, wearing his scrubs in the hallway after the session. He said, you know what, I wasn't listening. I was so angry. He told me his whole story. And he says, about the 3rd sign of bitterness, he said, I started thinking. I looked at my wife and I mouthed to her, is that me? His wife froze. He's already exploded and yelled at her and she thought, if I say yes, he'll get even madder at me, saying, yeah, that's you. You're bitter and you're ruining our lives. And she said, but if I don't say anything, it could be the moment the Lord, gave me to just share the truth with him. So he looked and said, is that me? And she went, and you know what he told me? He said, I didn't hear another word of your sermon. I thought, I've heard that all my life. People fall asleep all the time. I'm kind of like a somnambulist. Do you know what that means? I make people fall asleep, but because I'm so soothing. But he said, no, it wasn't that. He said, I looked down at the floor, and he said, I began crying out to God. I said, God, I'm ruining your reputation in this jungle area. I'm ruining the lives of all the people I'm sending home. I'm ruining the outreach of the gospel in this place, and I'm ruining my own family. I am so bitter. And he repented right there. I mean, that guy in the hallway, it was instantaneous. He was radiant. Did you know we're all prone to relational bumps, even if we're famous medical missionaries, and scrapes and wounds, even if we're in the ministry or if we're in a beautiful setting like this, and we can easily get infected with spiritual deadening bitterness. We constantly need his cleansing.